Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a conversation with myself, Danna Beal, and John Smallman. John is in New Hampshire, and I'm in Seattle, and we've done this a few times before. And John, it's great to see you. How are you today?
I'm good. All the better for seeing you, Dana. You're looking wonderful, as always.
Oh, thank you. You're always so thoughtful and sweet. Well, you and I have many conversations that are not recorded, and we really enjoy chatting with each other. So periodically, it's fun to share what we talk about because we're both, we're out in the world and we want to help people understand how they, like we, are on a path of learning and awakening and learning to understand your own life and find more joy and peace and miracles. And so before we start though, John, could you tell everybody a little bit more about you, that you've written a book and how they can contact you? And I'll remind them again at the end.
Yes, sure. I was brought up Roman Catholic and I had 10 years in Jesuit boarding school. And it took me a long time to shed all that because there was a lot of dogma and fear and the hell thing. And later in life, I suddenly realized that God is infinite love and there is no hell except any hell I might make for myself. And I read a number of channeled books in the 80s and was very taken with them. And around about 1995, I suddenly thought, if I could have my own spiritual guide, it would be wonderful. So I sat down one evening with a pen and a piece of paper, and I said, if there is anybody of high spiritual integrity in the spiritual realms who would like to come through, I'm here ready to take dictation. And immediately words dropped into my mind, and I got a short message from an entity whose name was Saul. I didn't discover that at the time, but it happened later. And I have been channeling him since that time, 1995. And I have a blog on which I post messages from him and which I read them out aloud. So you can read them or listen to them or both. And then in about 2011, after I'd been doing this for some time, I started the blog in 2009. I got a vague hit that Jesus wanted to come through. And I thought, hey, lots of people have talked to Jesus. We have the Course in Miracles. We have various other channeled messages. Why would he want to bother with me? And I dismissed it. But it kept coming back. So after about a month, I sat down and invited Jesus in, and blow me, in he came. And so I started a second blog with Jesus. So the two blogs are www.johnsmallman.wordpress.com and www.johnsmallman2.wordpress.com. The first one is Saul, and the second one is Jesus, if you'd like to check them out. And I think
Great,
that gives you enough for a start.
great. And I know you have thousands of followers all over the world. And I'm sure today we'll add some new people. My story is a little different. I have had an inner guiding voice that has been with me probably when I was young, but it became more vivid in my 20s. And but in 2000, exactly in the year 2000, I was awakened in the night with a very powerful message about healing the workplace and how there was so much suffering and pain and a web of egos in the workplace. And as a business consultant, I often spent time in many different kinds of workplaces, and I knew it was true that there was a lot of pain and suffering and blame and shame and guilt, but I didn't really recognize how draining it was and depleting of energy for so many people. And so I wrote a book then, and I wrote another book. My more recent book is The Extraordinary Workplace, Replacing Fear with Trust and Compassion. Oh, and by the way, John, I know you wrote Our Divine Destiny. And both our books have a similar message. And we're both talking to people that really want to awaken and connect with,
Absolutely.
yes, and connect with our divine self, or our inner self, our most authentic self. And so I went on to speak all over the United States and Canada to thousands and thousands of people and business audiences and conferences. And you and I have done webinars. I've done webinars and podcasts and radio shows with a lot of people. But we continue to grow ourselves. And as we grow, we want to share more of the insights that we receive. And so you and I talked about this. We haven't planned what we're going to say, but we decided to talk about the topic, don't scare yourself to death. with your own fictitious stories. And the reason I decided that would be a good title, even though we've talked about fear before, a couple of weeks ago, and it happens fairly often in my audiences or groups and meetings of business people, people are in a lot of fear. And I realized one day that they create even bigger fearful stories than what is actually happening. They take a situation in their workplace and then they magnify it, and they get so concerned and worried that I realized, actually, I said that to an audience. You need to stop scaring yourself to death and let the feelings arise, and find out what is causing that. And so, John, in your experience, when people are having negative feelings or pain or anger, tell me what you have discovered about that.
Well, it seems to me that people have a sense of inadequacy or worthlessness. And maybe if they're meeting someone new, they're on edge because they're wondering how they'll be judged. And the reason they wonder how they'll be judged is because they're judging themselves all the time.
Right.
And when you judge yourself all the time, you assume others are doing the same thing. And then you tend to judge others as well and expect them to make negative judgments about you. And we need to let go of all that sort of nonsense and just be ourselves. Here I am meeting someone new. I have something to offer them. They have something to offer me. Let's go from here. And I have no doubts about it.
Yes. Well, sometimes the fears get so strong, and they may not be identified immediately as fear. It may feel just like a pain in your heart, or it may feel like anxiety. But sometimes they get so strong they're almost debilitating. And what I've discovered is that when we're feeling those emotions, and like you said, John, it really is based in lack of self-worth, which is what we all suffer from. We have trouble,
Correct.
yes, we have trouble accepting that we already are worthy, that we are loved, we are lovable, that we belong here, that the more we connect with our inner self, the more we can feel love for others, we can receive love. And so I think that a big part of our message is to open our hearts and see the love in our own heart so that we can then shine that light to others. But sometimes it takes pain, it seems, that breaks the heart open so that you can let the love and light shine in. And some of us are hard nuts to crack. We try very hard to be strong and take care of everything. But in truth, that pain is actually a message to us, a message to pay attention. And John, you had some comments about that when I first called you, about why you think some of that occurs and what we need to do when we're feeling that pain.
Well, I can't remember what we said then. My memory is atrocious, but what I am aware of is that we all have an inner child who was hurt, abused when we were little. We were always being corrected. We weren't doing this right. We didn't make our bed. We spilt the milk. We weren't working hard enough at school. And so this little inner child has shut down a lot of its feelings so that it can stand the abuse that's been going on, and it pretends it's not happening and it's all buried. But when you go to a new meeting or a new situation that you have to deal with, the feeling of fear comes up, and you're not aware of the inner child, you're just aware of the feeling. But it is, in fact, your hurt little inner child from way back who is sitting there anxious, worrying what on earth is going to happen. And this is what drives all the unpleasant feelings in your body at this time.
Yes, and when we do revert into that fear, we actually are like the little child. Well, even our behavior can suddenly seem childlike and defensive, or poor me, or a victim feeling, or a sense of life just isn't fair. And I was going to mention that the lack of self-worth can show up in a lot of different ways. And some of the things that I've noticed in myself and other people are a few of these things. I jotted a few things down. Sometimes it has to do with our financial worth. If we feel that we haven't achieved as much as other people, and we haven't acquired and accumulated a lot of wealth, it can cause us to feel inadequate, or that somehow we aren't as worthy as someone else. And when you think about it, that is the way our society views things. How much are you worth? What's your net worth? How much is that worth? And so people are striving so hard to prove their inner worth as a human being by proving it with lots of material things or accumulation of money. And the opposite of that is trusting that we're already worthy. And then second one, and then I'd like your thoughts about that. The second one is we often are worried about or finding fault with ourselves that we're not beautiful enough, or that we're not the right weight, or we're not the right age, we're too old, or we're too thin, or we're too our complexion isn't nice enough, something like that. And it's especially for women. They say that women's self-esteem goes down, especially teenage girls, goes down very rapidly when they start looking at fashion magazines and comparing themselves with airbrush models and unattainable beauty. And so that's another one that I've noticed. And here's three more that I was thinking about. A lot of times I call them the props actually, titles, educational degrees, certifications. As important as they are, we are still more than the letters after our name. And then
We are
another what?
far more than that. Yeah,
Yes,
far,
yes.
far more.
Yes, and yet we do judge ourselves and compare ourselves to others that way. Another way we find ourselves lacking or lacking in self-worth is we use the props to help us not feel inadequate by joining groups and associations and alumni groups and political groups and sports teams so that we can feel validated that other people would agree with us and accept us. And there's nothing wrong with any of those. In fact, teamwork comes when we get together and it creates a synergy. But sometimes we're using these groups to prove who we are, and we are still more than our groups as individuals. And then we can even use other people like our partner, our love partner, or even our children sometimes to try to validate ourselves. That my son's soccer team makes us a better family because our team's winning, and you actually see coaches out there having a fight over children's games. And then you can see people using each other to, for example, the trophy wife or the partner that, somehow elevates you. And in a sense, we sometimes are using people to make us feel more important. So all of those things are external. John, how would you describe the internal feeling that people are going through? And well, you kind of did, but what is the goal here when we have these feelings?
Well, basically, I believe that we need to validate ourselves all through the cultures, ethnicities, races, wherever you look in the world. Children grow up feeling inadequate and looking to their parents and their authority figures, teachers, and so on, as being so much better than me. And they never get to a stage of realizing that as themselves they are totally valid and they don't need anybody else's validation, and nobody is better than them. We
Right,
are all perfect. We were created perfect, and we are not intended to be a cardboard cutout of someone else. And
right,
trying to be a cardboard cutout is very self-destructive, because you can never achieve it, and you just keep judging and knocking yourself and finding yourself not good enough. What you
right,
need to do is look at who you are, what you like to do, and accept that person and say, this is who I am. I can't change who I am. I
right,
must accept myself and love myself because I came intending to be this person. This was my intent when I incarnated. I am a loving being, a creation of the divine, and I am perfect. As a human, I make errors, I do silly things, but that is part of being human, and I need to forgive myself for that, and I also need to forgive others for the same reasons. Once we start doing that, then we can get on much better together and start trusting. At the moment, we don't trust because we are in fear. What will they say about us? What do they think of me? What, all the
right,
time. And the only way to get through that is to say, I myself am fine. This is who I am meant to be. And it's worth doing that, say, morning and night, until it becomes a mantra that you believe in. You can't just read it and say, oh, yeah, that's true. You have to live it. And
right.
that's what we all need to do. And it's taken me, well, nearly 80 years to do so. So, I mean,
I know
it
it's
can
an
take a long time. Yeah,
ongoing
it's,
journey.
yeah.
I
Other people do it quite quickly, but
Well, and I don't think it's ever over. I think that we continue to go deeper. You mentioned incarnating. I That's what I think we're doing. We are incarnating more of our soul and inhabiting our soul. And so I like to say to myself, I am soul. I am occupying Danna Beal's body, and I'm here for a journey. And the journey is fun. It can be happy. It can be exciting. Sometimes it's painful, but it's still all part of the journey. And I believe my experience has been that the painful moments, the times when we put ourselves in fear, are actually choices that we're making to help us awaken, because these are the barriers to our being fully incarnated as the soul that we are, and it's not always operating from our ego that's fearful and afraid. And so in to anyone in the audience that's listening to us today, when you feel pain or fear, what if that is actually your path to learn to love yourself more and to see what the blocks and barriers are that you created in the past when you were a child?
absolutely so. Yes.
So I have a little exercise that I want to suggest, and uh, John, you can fill in or add to this as soon as I finish saying it. These are just some steps I recommend, and I have done this with many people in the workplace and personally on my own journey when I am facing fears. And what I recommend are the very minute you feel that pain or fear, to pause and take a deep breath, because we want to break the connection to the fear that we're making up and start to look inward instead of letting this pain and suffering be disguised. And then bring yourself to the present, because when you're in the present moment, you're no longer creating fears in the future. You're going to be in a position to deal with what's hurting right now, which is probably some image or fictitious story we made up, as you mentioned, when we were children. And the third step is, while you're focusing on your breath, is to try to let go of the busy mind, because our mind is constantly thinking, what if, and I can fix this, and trying to defend ourselves or compare ourselves. If we can let go of all of that, it's then that our wisdom and our divine self can help us understand what's going on. And then trust in the belief and the knowledge that we really are all interconnected to love, to one another. Love abides in all of us. It's the power that sustains all life. It's when we're out of um, alignment with love and we are in fear that we begin having the aggressive emotions and actions to other people, and feeling blaming and shaming, etc. And then I recommend, and John, you can tell me if you agree with this, that if you can look at it and hold it and not be afraid to look at it, it's like we're running away from our fear. If we can stop and look at it, that's where the breakthroughs or epiphanies come through. For example, you may suddenly realize, I have been trying to be a certain way because I believe that if I did the things that my mom and dad said, I would be more valuable in this way or that way, for example. And then know that we have the power inside ourselves to face it. We don't have to give in to being a victim. That's just another belief system. And then even remind yourself that 99% of the things we worry about never even occur. So I think the answer is, let the hidden fears emerge and arise, feel the feelings, and then look behind them to see, where did you create this fictitious story, so that you can recognize it isn't true, it's a made up belief, and it's a barrier to joy. So, John, your comments and thoughts about that process, does that sound like what you like to do too?
Well, it makes total sense to me because, in a different way, I grew up and at school I was always bottom of the class, so I never felt I could do anything worthwhile. And I became an airline pilot. I thought that would be easy, drive something. But of course, airline pilots are checked and checked and checked. And early on in my career, when I was doing the initial tests, I used to get very wound up and terrified. And I would be in almost a sweat waiting to do the exam. And on one occasion, weather prevented the test occurring as planned. We were delayed about 2 hours, and all my fears had dissolved by then. They'd just
Wow.
gone. And
Wow.
the whole point of doing a breathing relaxation thing is to let that happen immediately, because
Yes.
you focus on your breath and you let go of the worry. And you just, every time the worry comes back, you focus again on your breath. And as you focus and take slower, deeper breaths, you do calm down and you feel more at peace. And that is your natural state. It's unnatural to be all tense and anxious. And yet a lot of us live in a constant state of fear and anxiety because of all the things we have to do or haven't done. So it's very important to try and relax every day for brief moments. You can do it when you're in traffic, waiting for the lights to change and things like that. Just take a moment and let go.
Yes.
And as you practice it, it becomes much easier and you find yourself much more at peace,
Yes.
which, as I said, is your natural state.
Yes. One of the questions I ask myself, and actually ask my different people that I discuss this with, and the people in my audiences, what is our intention? Sometimes we don't understand that what we're doing is being driven by a fear or a nagging pain. And it's only through slowing down that we can start to see that everything's really originating in us. It's not being caused by someone else, it's a belief of some kind. But when we can't look at it within ourselves, we can tend to project it onto somebody else. That's when we see the anger you were mentioning, or the um, resentments and judgment of other people, because what we're really doing is avoiding looking at ourselves, so we want to blame it on somebody else. And
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, and then it becomes, for example, John, if I blame you, what do you want to do?
I would say, why are you blaming me? It's not my fault.
Yeah,
And we start an interaction of blame, 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 and shame. It's crazy, right?
exactly. It's a reaction, a counter reaction, a
Mm.
reaction, counter reaction. And so
If
it,
you don't react to somebody's negative judgment, you just let it flow and you don't defend yourself, it pretty well disarms the other person because they need you to hit back. And
that's
if you don't, it cools things down.
That's exactly right. We actually validate somebody else when we react by getting upset or mad or defensive. We're in essence saying, I believe that what you said about me is true, that I'm really a bad person, or I didn't do this right, or I didn't do that right. I mean, I think we should always be open to feedback, but when people are attacking and blaming and shaming, which is what I see so much in the workplace, it only causes another reaction and counter reaction, and pretty soon no one's really just responding in truth. They're blaming and putting it outside themselves. And so I think the whole message we're talking about is reconnecting, coming back home to who we really are, our true selves, not these ego roles that we've sort of made up along the way as basically to keep ourselves safe and protect ourselves. But it's gotten to be just, it's like we're all actors playing out these roles. And so I think the pain and suffering going on in the world, it's not just in the workplace and it's not just in families, it's worldwide. And it's showing up in politics, it's showing up everywhere. And the stress level has been really heating up. It's the essence of each one of us can change that by unraveling our reactions and counter reactions with others. But it starts inside.
Well, this is it. What we see out there is what everybody is feeling within themselves: the fear, the anxiety, and the need to make a preemptive strike before somebody else hits them. So you accuse somebody or you judge someone, they go on the defensive because they feel it's unfair, and they strike back. And you end up each thinking that you're right, and that, yeah, you may have some faults, but the other person is far worse than you are. And there's no way out of that.
There isn't.
It just continues to repeat and repeat. You have to stand back from it and say, hey, we're not getting anywhere with this. This is pointless. We came here to discuss something, not to fight each other.
Hmm.
But if you've had a fight with your partner or your boss or something before this meeting occurs, you're all keyed up and ready to attack.
Hmm.
So it's very important, again, before meeting with new people or business meetings or whatever, relax first. Let go of any of your anxieties. Oh, I'd better get the laundry, or whatever it is that's
Right,
worrying you.
right. Well, I start all my classes, no matter what the topic is, I start with mindfulness and bringing everyone in the room present and to get the thoughts out of their mind from what they were doing an hour before, what they're going to be doing afterwards. And that's just a practice that we all can do anytime, anywhere. And in fact, it brings us more clarity when we do practice mindfulness. It slows down the busy mind, the circuitry that is constantly creating problems and issues. And it can actually build new neural pathways that can lead to more calm, clear thinking and reduce our anger, our sometimes even rage, and help us find the peace, because ultimately that's what we're all looking for, is joy and happiness.
And
So
of course, when we're in a conversation with someone, everybody now has their cell phone and they're waiting for a call. There's an instant message there, and so they're distracted all the time to their phone. So the other person is feeling, I'm not being attended to, I'm not being seen, I'm not being heard. So they get their phone out, and we just separate each other
right.
from each other. It's crazy.
And so, kind of to wrap all this up, that's a good note to end on, is that really what we want from each other is our presence. We want to be present for those that we love. We want our loved ones, our coworkers, our communities, our families. We want them to be present for us, to hear us, to see us, to know us. And the way we can do that, the best way we can do it, is open our own hearts, heal our own wounds, and then extend that love to others. And I know you teach that in your books, your Course in Miracles classes,
Right.
and that's what I teach. I even call it, I even have a name, Love Shine. Let the love
Lovely.
love from our heart shine out, just like the sun has sunlight that's shining out. I think our heart can project and infuse others with the love we're feeling, but we do have to remove the barriers. So, John, to
Yes,
get your book again, it's John Smallman. If people just Google you, they can find it.
that's
But
right. Yeah.
but you have two posts that are WordPress posts that you told us about. And if people are interested in hearing more about me or finding my book, it's Danna with two N's, DANNABEAL. And I have a website, dannabeal.com. And I also have a blog called the12wiseones.com. And both of us, you can subscribe to either one of our blogs, and we'd love to have you join us, because I think it's going to take many, many of us creating the tipping point to gradually shift the consciousness on our planet. So, John, any final words or thoughts that you'd like to bless us with?
Well, just back to when you meet someone, you want to be seen and heard, and therefore realize so does the other
Yes,
person. And so go in ready to listen with a smile and a welcome greeting to make them feel relaxed and at home and at peace. And then your meeting will flow beautifully. If
yes,
you go intense and worried, it can go horribly wrong sometimes. So relax,
yes.
allow, be present.
And then rejoice when you see the epiphanies and breakthroughs that you have. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. John in New Hampshire, Danna in Seattle. And we are really happy that you joined us today. And tell your friends, and keep going out and sharing and giving love. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dana. I
You,
enjoyed this.
thank you, John. Bye.